I caught that you were tweeting a lot about the Ohio State Pro Day that went on today, and it was a lot of stuff coming out of that, going on with C.J. Stroud, going on with Jackson Smith and Jigba. I know that we wanted to kind of dive into the expectations for 2023, but having you here and seeing how things kind of worked out for C.J. Stroud, I got to ask, do you think that he's going to end up a Carolina Panther after some of the stuff that we heard going on today in at Ohio State?
Yeah, I think he will. I think it comes down to the measurables between him and Bryce Young. I think he's just a bigger guy, the more prototypical quarterback, NFL quarterback. And I mean, I think he's a very accurate passer, a guy who can make throws that I don't think many other college quarterbacks can make. There's some negatives there. Being able to take the yards running. I think Bryce Young can, if you're splitting hairs between the two, I think, but I think at times Bryce Young is a little bit more better at working the pocket and finding that player. Both very smart players, but I think he fits what the Panthers are looking for.
Chimney, let me ask you this, because during the season, Joe and I were doing a Saturday morning show. We're breaking down all the games, and there was a statistic on C.J. Stroud in reference to when Marvin Harrison Jr. was in the game, not the Colts, Marvin Harrison. I mean, come on, guys.
Good.
But Marvin Harrison Jr. was in the game versus when he was out of the game, and it was a little alarming how bad his numbers dropped off. So let me ask you two questions, okay? Number one, do you think that that's a little bit of an overreach? Like if anybody loses a number one wide receiver, yeah, you would expect their numbers to drop, right? But then number two, let me ask you this. Ohio State, which by the way, all of them are New Orleans Saints fans, or New Orleans Saints players. I mean, just ask me as a Saints fan.
Right.
But is it alarming to you just a little bit that I know that Marvin Harrison is coming back, but when he's out, that it's been so far of a drop off at that position, seeing like somebody like C.J. Stroud have struggles when Harrison's out?
Alarming for Ohio State or alarming for C.J. Stroud's projection?
Well, I guess both. I guess both in a scenario. Is it alarming for C.J. Stroud? I don't think it is because he'll be the number one overall pick.
Right.
But for a new quarterback, do you think that could be just a little bit alarming?
I don't think so. I think Marvin Harrison is a special talent. What happens when you have such a special talent? This is the thing. It's like Ohio State has really good receivers, great receivers. Emeka Egbuka, I think, is going to be a highly touted guy going into the draft himself. But what happens when you have one guy who's so much better than everybody else? You feature that guy. It doesn't matter who else we have on the team. We feature that guy.
No doubt.
Took everything his way, and then when he goes out of the game, the game plan is now shooken up. Guys were prepared to do one thing. Now somebody has to replace him. So it becomes a little challenge. It becomes a little bit challenging to shift. I think if you had, because you got to think Ohio State had two guys out, right? Jackson Smith and Jigba, who they pretty much didn't have the whole year, and Marvin Harrison. These are two first-round draft pick receivers. So I think it's really just being able to adjust after game planning and focusing on one guy to be kind of the weight of the entire offense, and then play everything off of him. And then you lose that guy. It's like losing LeBron during the game, and now you have to kind of shift and adjust in game.
You brought up Jackson Smith and Jigba, who I really am intrigued by him as a draft prospect. But what gets hard for someone like him is that we don't have any 2020 tape. And having covered and paid attention to him, like what do you think? Do you think that impacts how, when, where he might get drafted? By the way, he ran a fantastic 40 time, which is a great number for him. But do you think that there might be some overanalyzation on the fact that he didn't play this season, and some people might overlook him for guys that did play this year?
See, this is the weird thing about scouts and analyzing players is sometimes too much film is a bad thing. I would say I was a guy coming out, a fifth-year senior, who had too much film, too many things for you to watch, too much stuff for you to say, you know what, he's good here, but he doesn't have the flexibility here. He's not getting out of breaks. And I honestly think him actually being out, it hurts in terms of, they question whether it's toughness here. They'll question, whether or not we have enough film. But though he did enough to be intrigued. And now you have to compare him to the other guys. And you can only compare him with the film that he already has, right? Because he's a high-level player. So I think really it doesn't hurt him that much. I think what would have hurt him if he came out and ran a 4.6 40, I think that would have hurt him.
No doubt. No doubt.
I think he did enough to show that he had the speed. He has the speed. He runs his routes just better than all the other guys. He's a guy who there's nuance to his routes that as a corner, you get used to routes. You get used to receivers running the same things over and over again. Then you go against guys like Cooper Kupp. You go against guys like Wes Welker. You go against guys like Chad Johnson. And they have this little nuance to their routes where it's like, man, I'm just not used to doing it. I'm not used to this. Like just the way he turned his route. Antonio Brown was a guy. The way he did this is just not how everybody else does it.
Right.
They can add that element and not lose ground. And I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is that kind of guy. And I think the teams, it has to fit their system. I think they have to be looking for more of a slot type guy, but he is a player that can be impactful at the next level.
Well, if he falls to 29, the Saints will take him. And Joe, to your point, it didn't hurt Jamar Chase not having 2020 film. That's all.
Well, that was during COVID time, that's why it gets weird. It gets so weird.
I know. I'm just joking. Chimney, I'm gonna give you a question that I can't let you walk out of here without knowing. Is Ryan Day really on the hot seat? Is this real? Like, can you please put this to bed? Because Chimney, let me just tell you something. I've covered LSU as an example for a long time. We just talked about Chase as an example. Yeah. At 2019, legendary. What it is, what it is. If your down year is you going to the playoff, let me just tell you something, brother. Sign me up, okay? Is he really on the hot seat?
He's not on the hot seat.
Okay, thank you.
See, at Ohio State, though, the hot seat can get hot quick, though. So it's one of those things where he's not really on the hot seat. But, you have a bad year next year, you lose to Michigan, then the seat gets hot really fast. So based on what he's able to accomplish, I know it's going to be another solid year. Now, Earl Bruce used to come talk to us. Earl Bruce, the former Ohio State coach, he used to say, you lose to Michigan 3 times, you're done. So if I judge it by Earl Bruce's logic, then he may be on the hot seat. But no, not realistically. I think the challenge is who do you replace him with? I think that's always what you have to look at, because Ohio State is also going to be very careful in who they would select as the next coach, right? And Luke Fickell's there in Wisconsin. I think that would be the one guy that you would say, okay, yeah, this makes sense. But I wouldn't realistically say Ryan Day's on any type of hot seat right now.
Do you think the Brian Hartline hire, do you think that's going to maybe help them out a little bit? Because everyone's talked about how Brian Hartline has been this big boost to the coaching staff, and we've seen the results with the development of these receivers. You're getting these 5-star guys coming in, and then immediately they're becoming NFL first-round draft picks. We don't see this level of progression happen this quickly. Now that he's the guy who's calling the plays apparently next season, do you think that is going to help this Ohio State team next year?
Yeah, I think it can. We have to see if he's actually going to. Ryan Day is actually going to let go of the play calling. That's TBD to me. That's to be determined. I think he's testing it out here in the spring. I think it would be helpful, because I think Ohio State's biggest challenge is like there's a lack of attention to detail that I feel like we had when we were there. But I feel like these teams are more talented than the teams. I mean, we had some talented guys. James Laurinaitis, Brian Hartline was on my team. Malcolm Jenkins. I mean, we had some guys. But
shout out to old Malcolm.
Shout
out to my man Malcolm. Sorry.
Shout out to Malcolm.
Shout out to Malcolm. Malcolm told me that one time in a Saints preseason game on the sidelines, he goes, "Rafino, you need to lose some weight." So shout out to my dude Malcolm. He never hold it. Chimdi, that man never holds his tongue. And he gonna tell you with straight conviction. I'm just gonna let you. I mean, you know that more than probably I do.
That's Malcolm. For sure.
I know.
For
sure.
But I think Ryan Day does need to take a little bit more of a CEO approach to be able to continuously identify what the minor things that are getting past them week to week that need to be addressed.
But so I should have checked ahead of time, and you said though that you overlapped with Brian Hartline. You guys were there at the same time at one point.
I did, yes. I played 3 years with Hartline. Yep.
Okay. So
was he just like the guard?
That's what I was going to ask.
What was it?
It was hard to cover.
Was he to guard? Like How was he as a receiver? I should say you guard him in practice and stuff like that.
Hardline was good. Hardline was a very. You see the development of his guys. Hardline was a very technical receiver. So he was in college. He wasn't that hard to guard in college. But I played against him in the NFL. Now, I was hurt when I played against him, but I did not do great against him in the NFL. I'll be honest. I remember I was hurt. My knee was swollen, and I was battling injury. But I remember walking to the sideline thinking, man, is this the same guy from college? Because this is a lot tougher than what it used to be. But yeah, he was a pretty good receiver.
Chimdi, I'm along those lines. So Hartline is going to be the next offensive coordinator, obviously, for the Ohio State University. What do they need to do finally to take over Michigan? Is it an offensive issue or is it a defensive issue? Because we were just talking before the break. Okay, so example, we were talking Alabama and how the 3 toughest games that they had last year, opponents ran the ball on them for 187 yards per average, okay? Yeah. Then you look at like the Michigan game, they have 235 yards on the ground, massive second half. What do you think that they need to do to get to overtake that hump against Michigan this upcoming season?
Yeah, definitely defense. It's defense, and it's I say this a lack of attention to detail, but there's just things defensively that they're not consistently great at. And it's things that don't necessarily take a bunch of talent. It's just the ability to understand situational football, understand how offenses are attacking you, and understand where you're supposed to be and where your teammates are supposed to be. Mm-hmm. They've been challenged with that the last few years. They got better this past year, but in the secondary, I didn't think they did great. And then in that Michigan game, it kind of all fell apart. And I think part of it is new defensive coordinator, new rules. I think they'll be in that again this spring, and then have another camp. But I also think Ryan Day could help that by taking more of a CEO type role and approach to be able to continuously identify, okay, this is what we're not doing good. Even though we're beating these teams by 50 points, we're missing this thing. Like this thing that can hurt us when we play against a Michigan, when we play against a Georgia or whomever in the playoffs. And that's what I think they're missing.
Chimdi, the big question that we've got right now, I feel like with Ohio State that everyone's brought up, separate from the Michigan situation, is what's going on at the quarterback position. CJ Stroud's about to be the first overall pick, which it's becoming even clearer by the day that he's going to be the guy, the first overall pick. But at the same time, to transition and build off of the momentum from last year with all these receivers, you have to replace this supremely talented guy who was one of the best in program history. I think it's going to be Kyle McCord. That's just my assumption and who I think is the better guy of the two. But if, in your opinion, who do you think is the player that they should turn to as their quarterback next season?
Yeah, it's super early to really make the judgment, but I think it's Kyle McCord's job to lose. I also, if I was to make an early guess, I would say Devin Brown ends up being the starting quarterback.
Wow. Is it because of his legs, Chimdi?
I think it's more than that. So from what I've seen, and I mean, I haven't seen enough, right? I haven't seen much. and it's always hard to account for guys improving, right? So you see a guy, you say, oh, he needs to work on this, and then he works on it. And then, when he comes out the next time, he may actually be better at that. But Devin Brown, to me, has kind of this he's quicker at diagnosing what he's seeing and then making the decision. So whether it's to run, throw the ball to curl, throw the ball to flat, I feel like he goes through his progressions a little bit more, a little bit quicker, and it feels like he just has a faster clock in terms of in a better feel in their pocket than what I've seen from Kyle McCord. And that's based on very, very limited high school film and whatever. Devin Brown hasn't really stepped on the field in college. So what he's done in the spring last year and what he's done so far.
Chimdi, a couple more for you, and we'll get you out of here. Thank you so much for being our guest. Joe, do you want to? I'll let you take the last one because I know what you want to ask about the barbecue. I think.
Oh yeah. But I'll let you.
Chimdi, I want to ask you: were you on that 2007 Ohio State team?
I was. Yep.
Can you give me? All right. So I got 2 questions for you. Number one, what was your favorite memory at Ohio State? And then number 2, that 2007 national championship game versus LSU in the Dome. What do you remember from that game specifically?
So I'll start
Other than the
off.
loss, and look, I'm not trying. I'm fascinated by guys like. So, for example, okay, like y'all went up early, and I'm like, oh crap, here we go, LSU again. So, just like both of those, what your favorite memory in that 2007 national championship?
So the 2007. The 2007 national championship was interesting because I grew up in Louisiana.
You did, baby. Yeah,
I too was a Saints fan growing up. I ended up moving to Florida when I was in 9th grade and went to Ohio State. But I was an LSU fan growing up. You know, I was playing in the Superdome. I was so, pumped up. It was my freshman year. I was starting at corner. And they had really good receivers. They hadn't thrown the ball a lot to the tight ends that year.
At all.
So it was just speed against, we were getting knocked. Big Ten was slow. So they kind of built it into our heads that the LSU is like fast. And we had this period during the week practicing where it was like SEC speed period or something. We had to run. And I hated it because I was like, man, listen, first of all, I grew up in Louisiana. I was always the fastest kid. Like none of these guys are faster than me. I know half the team. I played against them growing up. Like I've been beating these guys in track my entire life. But when we got to the game, we focused so much on those receivers, and they beat us throwing the ball to these tight ends who were running wide open the entire game. We couldn't find them. They ran over doing the unbalance, and so it was one of those games where it was kind of a lesson. It was, be who you are and prepare. And know what you're good at, be who you are, prepare. And if you do that, what got you there is what's going to end up getting you to win. So that's what I remember from that game is that I felt like our coaches learned the lesson that game. Right.
Chimdi, interesting fact. Outside of the 2011 LSU and Alabama game, the national championship game, the second national championship game that had more NFL players on it was that 2007 national championship game between LSU and Ohio State. Out of I think 161 scholarship players, more than 2/3 of that team on both sides went to the NFL. How crazy is that?
That's crazy.
That's an NFL game if you really want to think about
crazy.
it.
And
what's your favorite? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Other thing about that game was I think it was Glenn Dorsey.
Yep.
I saw him destroy our offensive linemen so many times. I was like, oh my God, who is this guy, man? Like
number 3 overall pick. That's who,
He'd take like 2 plays where he kind of, he did what he needed to do. Then third down to come, he slapped the guy on the side of the head. I'm like, oh my gosh. My favorite memory though, I would say 2010, we went to the Rose Bowl out in California against Oregon. We had lost to Florida, when I redshirt, we lost the LSU in national championship. Then we lost to Texas in the Fiesta Bowl. So this year, nobody was giving us a chance against Oregon. We got the win the Rose Bowl. Terrell Pryor was a quarterback. It was a special moment for us. We had a good night that night in Cali. So that would be one of my greatest memories.